2 million Rial to $1 That's Iran's currency this morning. President Trump posted 5 words. Iran is completely collapsing. And he was just reading the ticker. Now watch Tehran's own parliament himself say it. We are hungry. We cannot survive. Now Scott Bessent, he called it an economic D-Day, the greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. It launches at dawn, and the mullahs who spent 40 years funding Hezbollah and the Houthis on oil money are watching their currency turn into confetti. This is winning without a ground war. No occupation, no coffins. And here's what I'm going to roll for you next. Galibaf's own Make America Hungry Again poster. The Newsmax headline, President Trump fired straight back at him, and Beijing's one-word answer to Bessent. 90% of Iran's oil goes to China. 90%. So watching a currency go from money to confetti at 2 million to the dollar will make any American look hard at what's actually holding up his own savings. Our faces its own pressure test. Ours faces its own pressure test. The midterm elections coming up, control of Congress on the line, and markets hate uncertainty. Uncertainty breeds volatility, and between now and November could be the most volatile stretch for the stock market and economy we've seen in years. Now here's the good news. Noble Gold Investments has spent over a decade helping everyday Americans protect their wealth with precious metals. Physical gold and silver you can hold to hedge the volatility. Simple, easy, and safe. Go to nextnewsgold.com or call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347. And for America's 250th, mention my name and get a 10-ounce silver bar free when you open a new qualified account. Don't let Election Day arrive without a plan. Tehran didn't have one either. So the IRGC spokesman, Brigadier General Hussein Mohebi, went on Iranian television and said the Americans have shifted to economic war. He's bragging about missile production while admitting the front moved to their wallet. That's a surrender notice with a press release stapled right to it. Now let's get into the tweets. The U.S. is preparing a sweeping new round of economic sanctions against Iran as the Trump administration intensifies pressure. Treasury Secretary Bessent calls the effort economic D-Day.
To unleash new economic sanctions against Iran to pressure the regime in Tehran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent wrote on Sunday, President Donald Trump and the overwhelming might of our military have significantly dismantled Iran's military capabilities and weakened its nuclear program. Now we are entering the end game. At dawn begins an economic D-Day, the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. The economic pressure comes as the Iranian Rial crossed 2 million to $1, a historic low for the country's currency. The head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council responded on X, saying if the economic war continues, not a single drop of oil will be exported, neither through the Strait of Hormuz nor anywhere in the Persian Gulf. Iran will regard any country's participation in or support for America's economic war against the Iranian people as an act of war. Despite this statement, reports do indicate that crossings through the Strait of Hormuz are up 400% over the last 2 weeks. The United States is overseeing vessels out of the Persian Gulf through a safer southern passage. The passage does allow for millions of barrels of crude oil to be exported each day. Still, the Iranians remain defiant.
The fact that the United States has once again moved from military threats, saying that it will strike and so on, to reviving its old plans shows that they are truly desperate and have no solution when it comes to the great Iranian nation. Therefore, they keep bringing their old plans back onto the scene.
The U.S. naval blockade also remains in place as CENTCOM says 70 commercial vessels have been redirected since the blockade was reimposed. In terms of U.S. military movement, the USS Abraham Lincoln is headed home after being deployed for 274 days. This aircraft carrier made its last port call in December, breaking a Navy record. The vessel is being replaced by the Japan-based USS George Washington. On Friday, President Trump doubled down on his position that the Strait of Hormuz is now U.S. territory.
They'll never have a nuclear weapon. They want to make a deal so badly. We don't even know if we want, because I view the Strait of Hormuz as an American territory right now. It's an American territory.
The question remains, will this economic pressure lead to a new deal or a return to combat?
So the Rial past 2 million to the dollar. President Trump puts in 4 words on Truth Social. Iran is completely collapsing. That's the president's read. Now here's CBS on Treasury Secretary Bessent stepping to the podium. Is set to announce new sanctions against Iran. And then we have this. Beijing up to 90% of Iran's oil, and Bessent wants their help. China's answer in short was no. China doesn't sound too happy about Trump's economic D-Day. The U.S. is expected to announce sanctions today, and countries still doing business with Iran will get hit too. That's obviously including China, who buys up 90% of Iran's oil exports. Bessent is promising the toughest sanctions in history and wants Beijing to help pressure Iran. China's response, basically no. Beijing says it will protect its own interests and warned that piling on more sanctions isn't going to fix anything. So the pressure lands on Tehran anyway. Real America's Voice gives us a peek inside the room for that announcement that happened today. This is right before the big announcement. We'll have the remarks in just a second here, but give you kind of some color on the room. Now here's the moment. Bessent names it Operation Economic Outcast, direct from the Treasury Department.
Today, at President Trump's direction, the United States Treasury has begun Operation Economic Outcast, an unprecedented campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its enablers. In the Second World War, D-Day marked the historic beginning of a campaign with our allies to target and drive the enemy from its positions, including those in third countries. Today, in that same spirit, we are launching an economic onslaught against Iran's financial connections around the globe. Our objective is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains this tyrannical regime until Tehran stands alone.
Wow. He lays out the choice for Tehran next, and there are only 2 doors.
Iran now faces a very clear choice with only 2 paths before them: complete global isolation and a subsistence economy, or a path back to normalcy with an opportunity to rejoin the global economy. Today, we are launching Operation Economic Outcast to foreclose every other option available to the Iranian regime. Treasury has mapped every node, every facilitator, and every network that Iran has used to smuggle oil and evade sanctions. Beginning today, the actions of Treasury and other agencies will tighten the noose and block every potential source of revenue that funds the IRGC and the evil Iranian regime. We are enforcing a zero leakage approach. There will be no minimal breathing space for the regime to rebuild its capacity to inflict terror against America and the world.
The White House puts its own stamp on it, calling this the single greatest financial offensive ever mounted against an adversary. Operation Economic Outcast unleashed an unprecedented campaign to sever every remaining economic lifeline sustaining Iran. America is entering the end game with the single greatest financial offensive ever mounted against an adversary. Operation Economic Outcast announced by the White House as well. A reporter asked a question everybody wanted asked: do Chinese banks get hit too?
Most powerful tools you have at your disposal is the ability to impose secondary sanctions on banks and financial institutions that facilitate transactions for Iran. Chinese banks have often been talked about being targeted, but we don't see any of those institutions targeted here. Is that something that is coming in this campaign, or is the very delicate trade truce with China something that could prohibit you from going that far and taking that very big step?
We want to make clear here today that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions, that if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. We find that the best way to engage with countries is through quiet diplomacy, and we are level setting with every country to tell them our expectations. We know who they are, they know who they are, so when the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves.
Wow. That's the hammer. Now watch Iran's parliament speaker, Ghalibaf, try to flip it around with a Make America Hungry Again graphic. Iran's speaker in parliament, Make America Hungry Again. You can't cover up defeats with false claims. Make America hungry again. 47 million Americans face hunger every day. Food insecurity exists in every country in America, every county in America. Yeah, that's what they're putting out there in Iran. Days later, the same man is singing a different tune, and President Trump reposted every word of it. Trump reposts Iran parliament speaker, "We are hungry, we cannot survive." The IRGC won't concede a thing. Their spokesman claims the missiles never ran out, and Washington switched to money because it couldn't win with bombs. Their spokesman at the IRGC, some believed Iran's missile stocks would never run out as the war dragged on. That never happened. Production continues. He claims the enemy's strategic weapons were depleted, and the U.S. has now shifted to economic war because Iran's military strength is clear. Reuters is looking into who else gets caught up in this, and the billboard in Tehran tells you how the regime is selling the story at home. U.S. is threatening economic D-Day for its trade partners, and this is the billboard that they have up in Iran. Isn't that funny? They're trying to be like Nirvana. Victory, sure. We'll see about that, won't we? So Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf built an infographic about American food banks, 1 in 8 Americans, 16 million children, while his own people can't even afford bread. President Trump reposted the Newsmax headline, quoting Ghalibaf himself, "We're hungry, we can't survive." He handed the man's own words right back to him and shut the trap. So Bessent has to hit the Chinese refiners and the Chinese banks, not mail Beijing a strongly worded letter. Xi already said no. He said he'll protect his own interests, and he buys 9 out of every 10 barrels that Tehran ships. So the toughest sanction in history are exactly as tough as our willingness to sanction China. That's the whole ball game. And guess what? Xi is coming to the United States in 2 weeks. Now, I want you saying it in the comments so it doesn't get lost. And share this with somebody who was told for 20 years this was impossible without an invasion. Subscribe because the legacy press ignored the blockade all August and only found the story when Reuters cut a podcast about it. The carriers are real, the threats are theater, and we're staying on this one all the way to the end of it. So Ghalibaf is making memes while Bessent loads the hammer. That's what's happening. The next move in this comes out of the West Wing, not a wire service. So just text White House to 844-840-4963, and you get what our credentialed team pulls from inside that building on your phone tonight before YouTube decides how many of you deserve to see it. But information sitting in your pocket doesn't move anything by itself. Text Signal to that same number and list in the next news Signal Corps. Take a rank, take an assignment, and work the grid with patriots who actually push back. Come get in it with us tonight.